Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in China this week. And like it or not, he's there for exactly the same reason every other country eventually engages with China, to make sure that Britain is at the table rather than on the menu. This is a significant visit. It's the first of its kind by a British Prime Minister since Theresa May went to Beijing all the way back in 2018. And as historian Peter Frankopan put it this week, Starmer will surely need a stiff drink on the plane to Beijing as he works through what cards he has to play. Now, that comment from Frankopan matters, I think, because it kind of gets to the heart of the problem. What cards does Britain actually have? Ahead of the visit, Starmer was coy, some people have said deliberately vague, about what he would raise with President Xi. Not that there was any shortage of topics to discuss, because over the past few years, relations between London and Beijing have kind of soured and they've become increasingly fraught. On the security side, there have been allegations of espionage and influence operations, and these have really hardened political suspicion in the United Kingdom. In December, the Foreign Office disclosed that it had been hit by what it called a sustained cyber attack, and it said that it suspected this to be the work of a Chinese-linked group known as Storm 1849. Now, that followed investigations into alleged espionage involving parliamentary researchers and repeated warnings about technology transfer and data exposure in sensitive industries. On the trade side, China has long been accused of facilitating sanctions evasion, especially on behalf of countries like Russia and Iran through opaque customs and shipping arrangements. Now, none of this is theoretical. It's recent history and it's all in the public domain. But we now know a little bit more about what was discussed between President Xi and Sir Keir on day one of the China visit, because China has released its official readout. The two leaders discussed cooperation across sectors, including education, healthcare, finance, artificial intelligence, and new energy. Now, Xi also said China would actively consider unilateral visa-free entry for UK citizens. According to Beijing, President Xi dismissed any suggestion that China poses a threat. And he said, and I quote, "No matter how much China develops and grows stronger, it will not pose a threat to other countries." That combination is definitely worth sitting with. Reassurance on China's terms and openness without concessions. And yet, disengagement isn't really realistic. The United Kingdom remains deeply embedded in Chinese supply chains and in global trade flows. And that's kind of where the tension lies. Yes, Britain still has clout. It's a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. It's a nuclear deterrent, and it has a G7 economy, even if these days it's closer to the bottom of the investment rankings than to the top. On the other hand, China's cards are also pretty strong. It's the world's second largest economy. It's a manufacturing powerhouse and a supply chain hub. And increasingly, it is unavoidable on issues from climate policy to financial stability. So cooperation isn't optional, it's structural. And Beijing's objectives are clear. It wants predictability from Europe. It wants less public criticism and continued access to financial markets, as well as deeper cooperation in research, in education, in green technology, and in investment. None of this happened by accident, because as you might know, for the last 3 decades, China has consistently and systematically built global networks, investing in infrastructure, energy, and transport, often where Western capital hesitated. And as a result, across much of the global South, China paired finance with diplomacy and trade, and it presented itself as a partner who was focused on growth, not as a partner focused on governance lectures and telling people what to do. And so over time, that translated into influence, a lot of influence. History doesn't count for everything, but it counts for something when you can offer a believable path forward. Back home, the visit has drawn fierce criticism. The proposed Chinese mega embassy in London has really sharpened political lines. Opposition leader Kemi Badenoch has said she wouldn't visit China at this time, and she's argued that Britain should prioritise relationships with countries that are more closely aligned with its values and its interests. Which leads to the real question. Is this a strategic pivot by Sir Keir away from the US and towards China, or is it something more pragmatic? An attempt to keep options open in a world where alignment is no longer binary and certainty is in very, very short supply. And here's why this matters beyond politics, because what we're watching at the national level in the UK is exactly what companies trading internationally are dealing with every single day, operating in environments where the rules are ambiguous, where risks have shifted downstream, and where indecision carries costs of its own. This is no longer about just choosing the right market. It's about building the capability to operate when geopolitics, trade, and strategy collide. And so I'm genuinely curious what you think about this. Is this realism on the part of Sir Keir, or is it risk-taking behaviour?